Hello, class. This is Nayara, and this is my presentation for a week 6 class observation assignment. For this assignment, I observed 4 classrooms while keeping in mind inclusiveness and best practices for children with learning disabilities. For this assignment, the Massachusetts Department of Education resources were very helpful. They provide a checklist for inclusive practices when conducting an observation. So I kept that in mind, and here's what I thought. My The first classroom that I observed was a first grade literacy lesson. This classroom, I jotted down a few first impressions that I had. For the class environment, the students were sitting in desks that were in a row, and the teacher was definitely able to keep them engaged. He was using interesting and fun classroom management strategies. And the third, first, right off the bat, impression I had was that the classroom itself seemed a little bit busy. There was a lot going on the walls, a lot going on up top on the board. It was hard for me even to focus on something that he was showing because of all of that going on. And I do believe that might have been a little bit distracting to the students. So it was a first grade literacy lesson, and the class was discussing things that happened in the past and things that happened in the present, and they were comparing the two. Um, for socialization, the students were encouraged to talk among themselves and share their thoughts and ideas. So because they were sitting in desks in a row, I felt like it was a bit awkward at times because they really only had that one person to talk to when they turned around next to them. Maybe sitting in groups would be better, more conducive to doing group work. Their thoughts and suggestions and ideas were shared, heard, the teacher encouraged them and built upon them. I also love how the students were able to use their knowledge to kind of build and guide the lesson, um, almost like they were co-teachers, and the teacher really took in consideration what they were saying, even wrote it down on the board, and they kind of created and guided their lesson with that. For behavior issues and modifications, right off the bat, I did not notice anything major. I did notice there was an aide in the classroom. I could hear her voice in the background. Um, but in the beginning, there was no apparent need. At one point, the children were out of their seats, and they were sitting in the front of the classroom in a rug. And I did notice one student remained in his seat with an aide or a para right next to him, and maybe getting that one-to-one attention that might indicate an accommodation or modification of the lesson being taught. Um, and this particular student was also sitting in the front row, which can also show an accommodation for either attention or maybe a spectrum disorder. No modifications were made to the lesson itself, although I think that this particular teacher's style of teaching is very unique, and he does use different styles to convey the same thing. So even though I didn't, the modifications didn't kind of jump right out at me. Having them embedded in the lesson is probably even better. And maybe not even being recognized, maybe just being the way that he, inclusively teaches all the time, which is a great quality to have. For extra feedback, this teacher really used a lot of movement strategies that I really liked, and I wanted to highlight them here also. First thing he did was review prior knowledge before the lesson. This can help with children with learning disabilities as well. Children can just, use that to help them retain the information, to even check knowledge of the students. What did we learn yesterday? Or what is this word called? He reviewed vocabulary. He made the students repeat the words back to him, which also helps with memory. I think that the one thing that stuck with me a lot, that I will use too, is he when he asked a question, he had the students whisper the answer in his ear and in their hands, and that to me just screamed like that, extra time that other kids may need to answer. If I've had opportunities to teach and to sub for different teachers, and when you ask a question, it's just so innate to just go with the first hand you see and have that student say the answer because they are so excited to answer and you are so excited to hear what they have to say. But by having them whisper in their hand, it gives the rest of the class a minute to sit with that question and to just, you know, wait until everybody can kind of come up with their own thoughts and then pick on somebody to say that. So I think, especially in the classroom I'm in this year with a lot of language learners, I think this will be a very useful tool. I'll run it by the teacher I work with and see what she says. He also had very good management strategies. He used hocus pocus, everybody focus, which I loved. I thought it was really cute, and it got them, quiet and paying attention right away. He used a lot of movement. He When they were reading, he said, "Let me see your pointer fingers," and they put them up in the air and they pointed to the words. He also used movement when reading. He had everybody stand up and kind of reading like you're driving, and then when a period comes, you break. Um, so all of that really just includes every type of learner. I really enjoyed the way he taught and some of the strategies that he used. My second classroom was a kindergarten observation. The lesson was about sentence structure, and it was called the Tangled Turkey. Compared to the last classroom, this classroom did have more of a setup that was more conducive to working in groups. Children sat in tables, and they were for the most part of the for the bigger part of the lesson, they were sitting down all together in the rug. Um, and my first impression also was that it seemed like there was a good ratio of kids to teachers. And it seemed like the general education teacher had enough support there in case that there was, learning disabilities in the classroom. So I thought right off the bat, that was a good sign. Um, for socialization, I think students were given the opportunity to work in groups and they expressed their thinking. And they did, after she explained the lesson, she sent them off into groups and they performed the activity together. And they also came back and presented their ideas in front of the class, which was a good way to socialize. For behavior modifications and accommodations, again, right off the bat, I couldn't see much. The aid was there, but not really engaging much in the beginning. Towards the middle of the video, I did notice a child doing different activities with another teacher on an electronic device. I did think that maybe he was, getting a special one-to-one attention from the teacher doing a different activity. So I could see that as a modification to the lesson. For accommodations, I found it hard to find different ways that she used to teach the lesson. I did feel like there was only one way for the students to show what they knew. The lesson was very structured, with which I understand that in kindergarten it sometimes needs to be, and it is also good for children with learning disabilities to have structure and to know exactly what is expected of them. But it didn't really allow for the children to bring back information in a different way. And I would love to have seen some of that. She also did perform constant checks of their knowledge, like asking questions. But because I had seen, the first video prior, I did miss that, kind of wait time to see, what other people would come up with in the class. And she kind of guided them through the questions from beginning to end. When I almost switched, she would have scaffolded her support a little bit and kind of taking that away as the class um, did progress. Another other observations that I had was I liked that she was almost teaching a social studies lesson about Thanksgiving and pilgrims and Indians, but she integrated it with literacy. I love how different subjects kind of come together. I hate the separate blocks for literacy and then a separate block for social studies. I feel like especially in kindergarten, first grade, it all needs to be kind of together. Even math sometimes and reading go hand in hand. Um, I did feel like the aide in the classroom assisted the teacher more than the students. And not to say that the teacher doesn't need assistance, but I think that maybe sitting next to some of the kids who I noticed were having a hard time sitting still on the rug would have helped. Um, and sometimes even like having the para kind of teach part of a lesson. Teachers teach differently and students learn differently. So maybe a different teacher helps could help children with learning disability as well. And I also missed movement in her classroom. I feel like it helps kids become engaged and make connections. Um, those were the two things that I found mostly, that the paras or aides in the classroom were being a little bit underutilized, and that she could have used more movement and more of her support to help her in the classroom. My third classroom I observed was a first grade classroom. It didn't specify the grade, but I believe it's a first grade classroom, and it was a vocabulary lesson being taught. For the classroom environment, what I noticed was it was set up in small groups of desks, which I really liked. And I really loved right off the bat how the teacher really tried to create an environment of inclusion. She really walked around the room and wasn't just standing in one spot, and really picked on different students to speak. And they all, followed her around the room. You could tell they were engaged. They turning their heads and following her wherever she was standing. So those are my two main, right off the bat, ideas about her classroom environment. Socialization, I think that the kids were prompted to discuss what they already knew right away. I really think she made students part of the lesson. She, instead of calling on one student and then kind of building herself on what the student had said, she had other students build on that one idea. Eventually, they got to the right concept. And I think this really reassures students that whatever they have to say, if it's small or if it's just it's just I think she used the word clue. Um, it really is valid in the classroom, and I think it builds their confidence, and that's very important on a child with learning disability, to have the confidence to speak up and say what they want to say, even if they think it is small. But like she said, it provides a clue to the bigger answer. So I really enjoyed how she did that. For behavior issues and modifications, there was a group of desks near the front of the room that only had two students and a little bit of extra space. This right away prompted me to think that it was accommodation for those students to be sitting right in the front, and maybe having more room for to allow a teacher to work one-to-one with them. Although nobody was pulled out of the classroom, the teacher halfway through the lesson did mention other teachers and how they had Rockstar Time, which I thought was a great name, where they would go and with this different teacher and work on things that they might be struggling with. So this could be a time where they're with their special education teachers. And Even though it didn't happen during the video, I think that's something that does happen in that classroom. Um, Again, some extra feedback I have about this classroom is that I really enjoy how the teacher made it a point to teach the students how to be proud of their input and what they had to say. She really, praised them for everything that they said, and really helped other kids build on that, not on what she was saying, but in what other students were saying. She really involved all the students in a supportive way. And it's really hard to do with the whole class discussion. It's a lot easier to do with a small group, but in a whole class, it is difficult, and she really did a good job. It was hard for me to tell if there was any children with learning difficulties in the classroom, but because of the age of the children, I wish she had used a little bit more movement also. I know that a small lesson doesn't account for what she does on a daily basis, but maybe even having them out of their seats a little bit. The whole lesson was only 15 minutes, so it wasn't a terrible long amount of time. But even with vocabulary words, I feel like even just creating a silly sign to go with a word helps any children that might have a hard time understanding or connecting to that word. My fourth classroom video, I think, was my favorite. And I honestly have watched it so many times because I just want to be like this one teacher. It was a kindergarten math lesson, and it was about decomposing numbers up to 5. This classroom environment, I think it was one of my favorites. I love sitting in groups, but I love how she had them not just in a group in a rug, but she had them in a U shape around her, which was really interesting. And the whole lesson seemed like a game. She made it seem like a game, and she built it into stories. And she had a lot of movement and a lot of songs, which is, my favorite for kindergarten. It's so fun. Um, for socialization, she asked students to talk about what they already knew about what they were learning right away. Um, and she really made the students part of the lesson with movement and real life scenarios. She even made a make believe movie theater with chairs and really had them moving around and actually being the math lesson, which really helps engage them. Um, for behavior issues, modifications, and accommodations, after the teacher dismissed students after the lesson, to work on their independent work as a group, she took a small group of students to her table, which made me think of an accommodation. And they did something a little bit different than what the other kids were doing, which was a modification. She used manipulatives a lot. She allowed kids to show what they knew in so many different ways. Every station, after she taught the whole lesson, every station that she had set up had a different way to show. Either it was coloring, either it was working with beads or cubes. Um, so I really think that is really really great when working with children with learning disabilities, having them have the confidence to express how they know in so many different ways. um, she really helped with social skills in the classroom, which can be great for even kids on the spectrum, kids with ADHD. And she made connections between the content of what she was teaching with real life scenarios and real life situations. She used movie theater and the grocery store, um, which was great. And she even made up little songs and tied the whole lesson into a story. So you get reading, you get movement, you get music, all together, and math. So I really liked what she did. Um, she was very calm, very enthusiastic throughout the whole lesson. She It was a 15-minute lesson. So the only thing it does concern me is that if there weren't any breaks in there, but I don't know if the tape got cut off for video purposes, but it was a pretty long lesson, and I didn't see any built-in breaks in it, which I would have liked to see. But I'm guessing they were maybe cut because of the video. But that was the only thing I thought that she missed, was really built-in breaks to help those students that really need those breaks learn. I really like this activity. I wish I could have done it in person, but with these crazy times, it's hard. These are my references. I will submit them to you as well. I thank you for allowing me to do this. I learned so much from watching just these four different children, four different classrooms with different children, and I really will have different eyes when sitting in and observing a classroom now. So thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.